Mr. Laporte. Today we're talking about changing the Constitution, Section 3, Chapter 8. And the objectives today are: how can the Constitution be amended? What rights does the Bill of Rights protect? How did later amendments expand democratic rights? And the main idea of this section is that the amendment process has made the Constitution a living document that reflects changing times. Just over time, the Constitution has been changed to include more topics and more people. A good example here is in your text there, Barbara Jordan, a representative from Texas. She talks about how the amendment process has over time included her, where when the Constitution was written and the amendments, first amendments, did not include slaves, people in slavery in the South. And then even after the Civil War and the addition of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, um, she being female, not given the right to vote until the 19th Amendment in the early 1900s. All right, so over time, she is then included. And it's weird to think that when my grandmother was born, uh, as a teenager, she would not have been expected to be allowed to vote. Eventually, that did change, but it's not that long ago that took a long time for women to get the right to vote. So, and that's through the amendment process, which is under Article 5 of the Constitution, how to change, amend the Constitution. And looking at this page here, this chart here shows that um, the way to do it is to have uh, amendments proposed by Congress. This is how it is usually done. The other method is to have a national convention, which most people don't want that to happen because they think that they'll actually change the whole Constitution, like happened to the Articles of Confederation. So people are leery; they don't want that to happen. So most amendments are proposed by the Congress, and once that passes, it is sent to the states for ratification. And you need three-fourths of the states to ratify that, and that's 38 states that need to pass it for it to become part of the Constitution. We have 27 amendments currently. The first 10, known as the Bill of Rights, in your packet here, we're looking at listing the here it has the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, and 10th. So to summarize what they are, so we're looking at initially protecting liberties of people, and that can kind of be summarized in the First Amendment, freedom of speech. And then you add SPRAP, the press, religion, assembly, petition. Being able to think and express yourself freely is kind of the cornerstone of American Constitution and life and democracy and in our republic that we live in. Um, Being able to express yourself freely is very important. And we don't want the government to abuse us. So after First Amendment, freedom of speech, and the other four rights therein, you have the right to bear uh, arms. That in the beginning of the country, it would have been important that citizens have weapons to protect themselves and their property, conflicts with the natives, conflicts with England or France. Canadians are part of the British Empire. You can have wars there. To be able to grab your weapons and take some kind of action against an enemy, but also, as in not successful, but the Whiskey Rebellion, that the citizens arm themselves and they want to make changes to the government. And the government suppresses that rebellion, but after they suppressed the rebellion, they weren't looking to take away the weapons of the citizens. Washington called out the militia to deal with the Whiskey Rebellion. So that type of action seemed more necessary back then and is a right that still is held by the citizens today. The Third Amendment, not to have soldiers in your homes, national emergency that we have currently. Still, we would look to have volunteers to accept soldiers into your homes as opposed to demanding it. So currently, uh, soldiers really aren't being housed by the citizenry, but that could change. But we got to look for the Constitution to the Constitution for guidance. Um, Fourth Amendment, search and seizure of your person and your property. Um, Currently, some people, my sister in Michigan, said that you have to have a letter that says you can be driving around to work, or if you're found driving around and you're not going to the grocery store, that you could be fined in Michigan. Uh, how does that play into our civil rights under the Constitution? But different times right now. All right. So then, if you are maybe they find something on you during a search, which needs to be signed by a judge. Um, they find something on you, and then you are accused of a crime. So the rights that you are read when you are arrested fall under the Fifth and Sixth Amendment. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say will and can and will be used against you in the court of law. You have the right to a lawyer. If you cannot afford one, one will be appointed for you. Do you understand these rights as mentioned to you? Those rights come under the Fifth and Sixth Amendment. Fifth Amendment, then, if you are given charges, the right of habeas corpus, that you charges will be presented so you know what the charges are against you. And then a grand jury deciding whether a crime has been committed and it is possibly you. They decide then that this is going to go to trial, and evidence for and against you, witnesses for and against you, the right to have a jury of your peers from where you are. All these things fall under the Fifth and Sixth Amendment. Moving on to the Seventh, if you have a disagreement with a neighbor, or a business has done something that infringed on your right or damage to you, medical malpractice, all these things can fall under uh, the Seventh Amendment, the right to a civil trial in things over $20. And today that would be $500 or more with inflation. So you could have your disagreements with others settled in a civil suit. And if you lose, though, you're probably going to have to pay the cost of the court and the fees of the person that uh, you lost to if you started the lawsuit, or you're in the lawsuit and lose. Whoever loses is going to pay a lot of court costs. All right. So then, eighth, mostly dealing with cruel and unusual punishment. Uh, Old world Europe would do things like dunk people, decide if they're a witch, trial by fire, trial by a battle, draw and quartering of people as a punishment, guillotine, hanging, um, the death penalty in general. For 10 years or so in the United States, deemed cruel and unusual, but not the actual death penalty, but how it was uh, delved out to certain people, that is deemed that mostly minorities were getting an unequal share of the death penalty. So some safeguards were put back into the death penalty. Who's going to qualify for it and how that's determined to be more fair now. And so death penalty is then allowed again. Amendments 9 and 10. 9, rights reserved to the people if it's not in the Constitution. And then 10, rights reserved to the states if it's not in the Constitution. Those rights belong to the people and the states. All right. And then from there, we have, like I was saying, Civil War rights, former slaves. Uh, the 13th Amendment, that no more servitude in the United States. 14th Amendment, rights of citizenship. And then 15th Amendment, right to vote for former slaves. All right. So Barbara Jordan talking about how, yes, blacks are allowed to vote after the Civil War Amendments 13, 14, and 15, but women not then until the 1920s being allowed to vote through the 19th Amendment. Then also the 26th Amendment, if you are able to vote next time in a presidential election, you can thank the Vietnam War. Soldiers going to Vietnam were saying, okay, I'm able to go carry a M16 in Vietnam as an 18-year-old and risk my life, but I'm not allowed to vote in an election absentee ballot or before I leave. I can't vote in a presidential election or any election until I'm 21. So we quickly changed that within 4 months of it being proposed, passed by Congress, sent to the states, ratified in less than 5 months. All right, so the many changes that have happened over time, that's why it's called a living document. Today, if we see a need, an amendment could come out of this coronavirus situation. That would be the 28th Amendment. How governors can make decisions, how the national government can make decisions on quarantine and medical constraints or dilemmas that are had. An amendment could come out of this situation. In Michigan, my sister says you got to have permission to be driving around in your car if you're not going to the grocery store. That is weird to think that those constraints in places where there's higher cases of coronavirus are more extreme than we have here in Wisconsin. All right, so quickly, we're just going to clarify that you're needing to finish Section 3, guided reading and review. Once you're done with that, there's a quiz on the back page from that. Take the quiz, and when we come back on Thursday, you should have that done. I'm going to set up a Google Meet. I'll send you an email that you can join and visit with me if you wish to ask any questions or just to say hi. So I'll be sending that out to an email with then the link to this YouTube channel. I'll be posting this on YouTube. Take care. Bye.